Hello, everybody, and welcome to Late Night News. I am Joe Compton.
Hey everybody, I'm Vanessa Junta, and I got a nifty new headset. Isn't it cool? Sorry.
That's awesome. Anita says
Thank you.
hello. Uh, yeah, and I just wanted to tell everybody up front here that there will be no marketing tip this month, but it'll be back soon. I promise. Don't worry about it. But just the two of us for the next hour, so you you know it'll be good. We have a really great show for you. We're gonna be talking a lot about disruption here this week or this month, I should say, and yeah, and it's gonna be great. So, Vanessa, you want to kick us off and talk about our top story?
Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, so y'all may not realize it, but the Independent Book Publishers Association's Publishing University 2024 was in Denver, and the theme this year was Rise and Disrupt. At an April 27th roundtable that they had at the show, addressed alternatives or creative tweaks to traditional publishing models. Introducing the panel, IBPA CEO, that's a whole lot of letters, Andrea Fleck Nisbet. I have so much trouble with that name because my brother-in-law's last name is Nesbit. So every time I see it, I say it wrong. So y'all just bear with me. Anyway, Andrea Fleck Nisbet questioned conventional measures of success. Quote, corporate publishers can operate on a model that allows for 8 out of 10 books to be unprofitable, she said, noting that indies cannot afford the massive advances or high returns that make this model possible. Quote, this traditional model is broken. It's bad for publishers, it's bad for authors, and it's bad for readers, but it doesn't have to be that way. So I do want to make note that when she talks about indies, she's talking about small presses. She's
Mm.
not talking about self-published authors who are also indie publishers in their own right. So we're talking about small presses. Okay, so let's talk about some of the disruptive ideas. Number one, rise above the supply chain and other. Uh, to kick off the opening keynote panel on how to rise above supply chain and other industry disruptions, Fleck Nisbet said that distribution and market access are top priorities for IBPA members. Quote, it's never been easier to put a book into the market, so true, and it's never been harder to sell that book, also so true. Revenues are not growing commensurate with new titles being introduced, and there are too many channels and not enough outlets for discoverability. She asked the Independent Publishers Group CEO, Joe Matthews, how independent publishers can develop a business plan, build a profitable backlist, and find distribution, not necessarily in that order. Matthews agreed that beautiful and well written books alone won't win a distributor. Though at IPG, we don't have a backlist size or dollar requirement that publishers need to meet before IPG will take them on as a client. Instead, a distributor needs to be persuaded that a publisher has the marketing and publicity to cut through the noise and the why to buy that Barnes and Noble is going to want to hear when you go to sell that book to them. This might mean a regional angle, a genre or subject focus, or a dedicated social media following. When a publisher has a built in audience and a niche, Matthew said, we know we're going to grow their sales with access to thousands more customers. Ultimately, Matthew said a small press needs to see 65% of their revenue come from backlist sales. The trick for smaller presses, he continued, is to find a way to get to a publisher's big pile of intellectual property and backlist to cover the cost of developing a front list. Both he and Fleck Nisbet both called this a chicken and egg problem and lamented the lack of subsidies and other financial support for independent publishing in the US compared to Canada and the UK. That's definitely an issue. Matthews has contacted philanthropists, including the MacArthur Foundation and McKnight Foundation, about supporting the indie publishing community. And Fleck Nisbet said organizations, including IBPA, might lobby for alternative funding models. In the meantime, quote, we actually do kind of want to see your business plan, Matthews concluded. Sell us, convince us, and then we'll want to be part of your mission and convince bookstores of the same thing. So what do you think, Joe? Like,
Hmm. Well, okay, a couple things. First, basically, he's spouting the 20 books to 50K model, which is, put out a bunch of books and then start selling, right? That's basically what he's
Mm,
saying develop a backlist and put it together, which, I agree with to a point, but I also disagree to. I think you can be successful selling a smaller backlist catalog. You don't need to develop a catalog the size of Falstaff Books or you know many indie presses that we know that have a bigger conglomerate of authors that put together. Um, and the other aspect of this that I think is interesting is the idea that putting the business plan forward instead of just going out there and hard selling it, putting yourself out there is okay if you're looking to just hand that off to somebody, which I think is what mostly he's talking about here. But if you're yourself, you're part of even if you're part of Falstaff, you're selling yourself a lot of the times, and you're
mhm,
putting yourself out there a lot more than most would think in the traditional model place you would, even though we all know that's not true. You do still sell
mhm,
yourself in that model place as well. It just seems like what he's trying to say is, there's a comfort in letting somebody else handle that aspect of it if you have all your
mhm,
ducks in a row. And I don't see that being the case, to be honest with you. I don't see that being
mhm.
as disruptive. I see that as being part of the machine.
It's the norm. Yeah, it's really interesting because what he's saying is basically the same thing authors are being told. Which it's not wrong
Right.
necessarily, but it's certainly not disruptive or new. But what is interesting though is that he's specifically aiming this at small presses, right? Which these are opportunities the small presses didn't have 10 years ago,
Yeah.
too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like basically what he's saying is, sell us. It's basically the same thing that authors have to do with readers, right?
Right.
Like you are going to make more money if you've got a backlist. It doesn't necessarily have to be, 50 books long, but you're going to make more money if you've got a backlist than if you don't. And so they're looking at those things to make a decision on whether to work with the small press. And so it's basically you've got to figure your business out and you've got to actually have some measure of success in the business anyway before they will help you,
Right.
which is par for the course with
Right.
capitalism, right?
I mean,
So,
it's
all right.
even it's even par for the course for if you're trying to do it traditionally, they all look at your
Yep,
social media following, they look at
yep,
what you've done in the past and who you've worked with in the
yep,
past. All of that gets
yep.
examined by them, and that's the determination. In fact, that's pretty much the only determination that a traditional model would take you on as a new client. If
Well, I
you
mean, you have to have the book first. If you don't
right,
have the
right,
book
right,
first, they don't get to any of that. But yes, that's
right,
absolutely the decision criteria.
right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
and I
agree.
think it's interesting too because as we go through these, the interesting thing is the thing that we talk about a lot on Going to Now, which is having a good editor, having a good cover, having none of that is mentioned in any of this
Mhm.
disruption in
Yep.
any of these things. It's all about the marketing aspect of this conference, and I couldn't find any other things about the conference where they had those elements in them. It
Mhm.
seemed like this was the strategy and focus for because I think what the IBPA is doing is basically saying, okay, we're going to help you get to that next level where you are a business and a seller in the marketplace.
Yeah.
We know you can write. We know you know that aspect of it. This is for people who know they have something, right? They have a book and it's
Mhm.
been vetted and all that.
Well, I think this is much more again, I think this is pointed at small presses and not at
Mhm.
authors. So
Mhm.
it makes sense to me that they're not necessarily harping on cover and editing and stuff
Yeah,
because they're assuming that as a press, you
you have
already
that.
know that. You
Yeah,
already have that, right?
yeah.
And so I just feel like it's this, I think I think this story is a little bit different than what we usually do, which is really geared towards the creators.
Yeah,
But I think it's really important to hear about this because that's what's happening in the industry at large, right?
yeah,
And so I think it's important as indie creators, we may want to go with a small press. So we need to understand how that works, because I feel like as an author being a hybrid, so having a traditional publishing contract with a small press or a mid-sized press or a big press, it doesn't really matter. Um, and doing indie publishing, like self-publishing. That's the way
yeah,
to go, is to have both. So we
yeah.
need to kind of understand this side as well, I think.
Yeah, and
So,
there's
but I
also
agree with you.
aspects of where I know a few indie authors who have had success on their own, being their own thing, their own
Mhm.
brand, and want to branch out and become a press and
Yeah.
help other
So
authors.
many.
Yeah,
That's how Falstaff started.
and
So,
and I
yeah.
think that this is a really good conversation for those folks out there because I think this is going to show them what is
Mhm.
going on in the marketplace right now and what
Yeah.
people who are doing
Because
it out there think, right?
yeah,
So
distribution is the biggest, most important piece beyond the actual creation of the product. So, yeah, absolutely. So, what's next?
okay, well, I wanted to mention one more thing about this
Oh,
part of
okay, go
it
ahead.
before we get to
Mhm.
the next thing, and that is the ironic aspect of that these were two different we should mention these are two different meetings. These were two different panels that we're quoting from, but this one mentioned the fact about how there is not a streamlined process for like help out there. And later on within this context, we're going to talk about a certain something that a lot of people are doing already that I think they'll be interested in crowdfunding aspect of it. So
Yeah.
which is one of those sources that they don't seem to think is available to people. All right. Well, that being said, number two on the list was being more
Mhm.
in house and actually more independent. Groups like Microcosm Publishing are utilizing sales tools like Working Lit, which I have an example of right here. Working Lit, which is helps run their day-to-day operations, track sales like BookScan does, and scales their inventory and keeps track of their royalties and who gets paid what. So it's a really good tool for booksellers out there. And the CEO Joe Bile of Microcosm Publishing uh, spoke in there, and he said, "You never want to take the right way to get there because that street is clogged, and you're going to have to fight for every inch of that way." For us, it's not about disruption. We look at what we paid Amazon and we what why we are paying them to sell our books. By putting that same effort everywhere else, we've doubled our sales within the year and quintupled our sales within 4 years. I don't think of that as a moral stance, he says. He also spoke to the distribution aspect, reminding the audience that a distributor is not one size fits all. In the wake of small press distribution's closure, and that consistent scramble for reliable distributors, Bile floated the idea of cooperatives. I've been pushing this seriously since 2008, sorry, since 2008, and I think I'm finally having my year, he vented. Like-minded small publishers could be the best off building their distribution networks, owning their means of production, and not relying upon another company who can fully appreciate their brilliance. I think me and Mr. Joel Bile would have fun at a conference. I think it would be a nice bar con with Joel Bile.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
What do you think
I
about
think
all
it's
that, Vanessa?
I think it's funny about, the bit that kind of just, like, stuck in my craw is I don't think of that as a moral stance, because, of course, it's money, so of course it doesn't have to be moral because you can do whatever the hell you want as long as you're getting paid.
Right.
So, yeah, sorry, I don't, because 'cause I'm like, "What who was talking about a moral stance? Like, when were we talking about morals at any point?" But, I think it really sounds like he's like, "For us, it's not about disruption. We looked at what we paid Amazon and are like, 'Hey, why are we paying them so much for books?'
Yeah.
For our books." And so it's just like, because disruption is a moral stance, he thinks, which it can be, but not always. I'm sorry, I got totally caught up in that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no worries.
Um, yeah. So, but I agree with him that, like distribution is not one size fits all. You've got to figure your own stuff out. But at the same time, it's almost like you have to be at a certain level to be able to become your own distributor. You know what I mean? You can't do that starting out. Number
Mm.
one, you don't have the expertise. Number two, you certainly don't have the money or the infrastructure, right? So while I think it's absolutely a really good idea is to, do all the things yourself. That's just not feasible when you're starting out, for sure, I
I
think.
chuckled. I chuckled at the cooperative thing because anybody who's ever been to a con has seen this on a micro level. Like, if you write urban fantasy, right, and if somebody's looking for
Mhm.
science fiction, you know that the table two
Yep.
tables down from you is a science fiction author. You're going to point them in that direction, and you're basically
Mhm.
doing cooperative distribution
Yep.
through that aspect. You don't get a piece of that pie. You don't get a piece of anything they do, but you get goodwill and
Mhm.
good moral compass for that, right? And
Yeah.
which is funny if you're going to be again using the moral thing and you're being cooperative. I would hope you have morals to be cool in a cooperative, but
I
yeah.
mean, you would hope. Yeah, no, I do think that happens, but I agree with you because it's really funny how they're, like, laying out these things that they're talking about are just so, so revolutionary, and it's like, they've been doing this for decades. Like, we vend together often, the writers troupe, we'll go to an event and be like, "Hey, who wants to vend with me at this event?" And we'll
Yeah,
go and, there'll be 2 of us or there'll be 8 of us. And it's like, "What do you like to read?" "Oh, you like to read about rural wizards. Let me introduce you to Mr. Bob Magoo," right?
yeah,
Like, it's like, "What do you wanna read?" "We have that, but it's not me, but it's over there,"
right.
because that's how you that's how human society functions best, always. So
Yeah, what I like though, why I like what we're doing here with this is
mhm,
they're showing it on a grander scale.
yeah,
They're showing that they are learning lessons from the smaller end of things, right? Because
it's about damn time. Sorry.
as a quote from one of our favorite shows, you and I of West Wing, you know, why do a small what does a small group of people do better than anything, and that's because it's the only thing that's ever worked, right? So that
Mhm,
they're the ones that make it work, and so small group shows the way, and that
yep,
is that I think all of these folks are starting to see that they've been around long enough. They see, the big way, the corporate way is not helping them, and
mhm,
so what are we going to do? We're going to take the smaller aspects of what has been successful for other authors and put it into a grander scale.
yeah, I think that's smart.
Yeah. All right.
So
So the
alright,
next point here.
let's go to number 3, which is reframe the outlook of who you are in the industry and define yourself, which is brilliant. Danielle Clayton, president and founder of Cake Creative and Electric Postcard, 2 different things, not all together. When I first read it, I was like, Cake Creative and Electric Postcard. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. They're 2 different things.
Yeah.
Anyway, she is the president and founder of those 2 companies, and she innovates as a book packager rather than as a publisher, and her focus is on diverse representation. Clayton called herself, quote, "an outside agitator of publishing" in the IP space. Someone who starts with their own intellectual property, shares it with a writer for hire, and packages the result. A former educator, she spent, quote, 7 years to get my first yes as a children's author, which made her wonder how long is it taking for other people from marginalized backgrounds to get in? How can I shorten that runway? She dreams up, quote, ideas that don't press down on the bruises of the collective backgrounds of marginalized people in order to create highly commercial products that all publishers can get excited about. When the moderator asked her about labor and compensation, Clayton replied that she doesn't ask writers to work on spec. That means not having a contract
Mhm.
for the writing that you're doing. She says, quote, all of my writers are marginalized, and I believe to be able I believe to be able to write on spec is a privilege, she said. I'm a writer as well, so I don't give a deal I wouldn't sign. She relies on other ways to make the math work, including upfront one-time payments and royalty packages. As a Black creator, quote, being here in the body that I exist in is disruptive to publishing, Clayton said. And her goal is creating new opportunities for writers that have been in the margins forever and haven't gotten the same opportunities as others. While she's primarily packaged books for children, she's now developing general titles that can be adapted in other media. So she sounds like she is
Eh,
really smart.
yeah,
She,
she's she's the one on the panel that everybody's going to talk to at the end of this panel, right?
yeah, yeah,
She's she's
yeah, yeah,
she's the she's the every woman in this scenario, where we have
yeah.
the corporate guys. She's the one that's doing it. They're really
She's
hands on,
she's
right?
boots on the ground.
Yeah,
She's boots on the ground. Yep.
yeah, and she's
So
doing it with
I'm
a
gonna
purpose, which I think is fantastic.
yeah. Oh yeah, with a moral
Mhm.
compass.
Yeah. Yes.
With a moral compass. So I'm gonna be honest and say that I don't understand what she does as a book packager that is different than a publisher. Like I don't understand that. Um I like what I've read like I feel like at some point I understood it and then some things changed and then I didn't understand it again. So
Maybe the marketing strategy to who she's marketing to might be a little bit different, or maybe
mm,
she's when she means packaging, she's packaging not just the book that's being read, but the author that is producing the book. Maybe.
yeah. So I'm also thinking, like, because she's talking about other media, I wonder if she means packaging the book in order to
Could
present
be.
it for film or
Hmm.
TV or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but she's super smart, and I absolutely agree with her, like the reframing your outlook. And even though, like, it wasn't as she's more of an example of
Hmm.
of that than necessarily saying this is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
She's the example of
Yeah.
reframing and which is exactly what indie authors did back when KDP was Create Space and like the very, very beginning of those things.
Yep.
They reframed the outlook. And it's so hard to do that, I think, because there's so much going on in publishing right now. And there's
And,
so many and the things in indie publishing change so quickly. Um, Anita says she may be using packaging as a branding term.
yeah.
Maybe, but I do know that it's actually a term. It's actually a term in the industry because I've heard it before. And I was when I was at the 20 books to 50K show several years ago, I remember there was someone there who was a book packager, but I
Mm.
didn't talk to them because I was doing other things. I probably should have because then I would have learned exactly what a book packager does. But I think that's what it is. I think it's that they package up the product to then pitch it to other like whatever.
That makes sense.
Kind of
That
like
makes a lot of sense.
yeah, I think so, but I'm not positive. So I'm gonna be clear in that I am not super I do not have a tight grasp on that particular thing. So
The thing that I
but
really gathered from this aspect, this is a true disruption in my opinion. This is probably the one that I thought was like super disruption, because it is taking what the industry wants to be, they say they want to be, but they don't really want to be, and putting it out there and pushing it and putting it forward, and doing so on your own, right? And taking a cause and a segment of a population that doesn't get represented in books in a fair way,
yeah,
in the
yeah.
traditional model, even in small press models, Although small presses admittedly are a lot better about that than bigger than the traditional models are. And the traditional models, when they are concentrating on that, they're very patronizing about it. It's not
It's
to
very
celebrate.
PR.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah,
PR.
yeah.
It's very
So
PR.
what I really loved about this segment and reading this, and then reading about her a little bit too, because I did veer off into a research rabbit hole with her a little bit, is that the focus is on how to build that aspect and build on top of that. And her philosophy is the philosophy of this channel and everybody who's involved with us and who we love, and even those we don't like that are part of our community, which is, not many people, so to be fair. But that all boats, all boats, rising boats, rise all boats, right? That the
Ri
tide.
a rising tide lifts all boats.
Thank you. Yeah,
That's
that,
what you're
that,
going for.
that. Yeah,
That's also the 20 books to 50K motto. That's their
yeah,
motto too.
yeah. Well,
Oh, 20
it
books
takes a lot
20
of
books
boats for
has
them to rise, but yeah,
well, 20 books is a good framework. It's a good
yeah.
framework. You may not like the aspects of the group, but it is a good framework. So,
Yeah, and I agree with that. I do, and so yeah. But I think that was very interesting. So I was really excited about that. And then the fourth one is obviously the one that everybody's going to be talking about. I think, and everybody's. I mean, because everybody's doing it now. I mean, every single person I know
everybody.
has
Yep.
tried this, and that is the crowdfund to get the results that you want. They had Oriana Leckert, head of publishing for Kickstarter, contributed her perspective to the roundtable. And she says, I think Kickstarter is fundamentally disruptive because it flips the traditional P&L, profit and loss, on its head. Leckert said, an entrepreneur could empty their bank account to start an indie press and desperately hope that everything works out, or you could just get the money first. She spoke to a persistent misapprehension that crowdfunding is begging for charity. It's exactly not. You're just saying support the creative work I'm doing and get the things in exchange. She encouraged the audience to think less about the funding and more about the crowd. Where are they? What do they want? What offers can be compelling enough? The reward structure is, I think, the most exciting part of a Kickstarter campaign, she says. Leckert's examples included YA fantasy novelist Cassandra Clare, who for a $300 investment, she wrote long hair. She said she'd write longhand a quote from one of her books that you could get tattooed on your body. Horror novelist Matt Dinnerman, who was at Jordan Con, for $666, he'd kill you off in his next book, and for $777, he'd bring you back to life.
But it's so clever. Just the cleverness of that just makes it great.
And then, graphic novelist, I'm not even going to try it.
Kwanzaa
Yes.
Kwanzaa
Asapodalu?
Osayefo?
Okay.
Osayefo? I
Who
think?
defied
I'm
mainstream
not
opinions that his black superheroes were too niche. She's seen a huge influx in all the special editions right now, particularly in romance. Author Willow Winters crowdfunded for her pink gilt edges on her debut. I've seen a lot of this too. This is something that Courtney
cool.
actually loves
I
to
have
collect.
something Yeah, I have something to talk about with that too, because I saw Courtney's marketing tip. We should have replayed Courtney's marketing tip for that.
Yeah, we should have. We should have. I didn't even think about it. Kickstarter's highest funded nonfiction book last year was called Shift Happens by first time author Marcin Winchier. Uh,
Witchery.
Leckert, Witchery, sorry. Leckert added, it was an 800-page oversized coffee table book on the history of keyboards, and the man raised $700,000. Obviously, not everyone's a six-figure fundraiser, though.
Yeah,
So
most people
Leckert
aren't.
reminded IP IBPA members to think about the goals besides cash. Kickstarter is a business of giving your audience. And even a small scale fundraiser supplies a mailing list. You can find your audience on Kickstarter, whether it's people who love typewriters, black people, or people who want to read smut. We're all there, she says.
Truth.
So,
It's truth. I wanna say those, fancy pages and stuff, like the
hmm
Gildan pages or, really pretty, graphics inside the books, those
hmm
are those are taking off right now. There was a woman at, Atlanta Comic Con this year, and she had all these they were gorgeous, and she gave me the name, and I can't of the company that she uses because she uses different companies for different
hmm
things. But, anyway, that doesn't matter, but I lost it. But I have her name, so I'll reach out to her again. Um, but yeah, I think, Kickstarter's perfect for stuff like that.
I don't know if Toby showed you his new book, but his new book has the titles and each chapter title in kind of this kind of nice little graphic in each
Mhm.
chapter title, which I
Yep.
thought was just beautiful. It was beautiful,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I think that is. I think there is an aspect of that Kickstarter can help you get to, but I also think you have to be creative with the way you
Mhm.
present like that. What Matt Dinneman did was, the $666 that's creative. That's a creative aspect. I mean, I don't know anybody who would pay that amount, but for him, probably there are people out there that would do that.
There
He's
are
got a
people who
fan
would,
bases, but
but there are
it
people who would.
yeah, I mean, and I hope I meet some of them someday if I need to fund my film. But
Mm.
but yeah, I just feel like there is a lack of understanding about Kickstarter that I think that Lecker really brings out here, and I think it is the future of our business. I really do think that. And Anita says, I know several authors that use Kickstarter for special editions in their books, and the one author that funded off of their Romantasy series, and it's great to fund anthologies. Yes, yeah, I think.
Tons of them.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I contributed to a couple anthologies this year, so and last year.
Okay.
So, but
Yeah, same.
you know, I just think. I do think that it is a model for additional business. I don't think that it is a model you can base your business on, though. I don't think I don't think you can do that all the time.
Look at Zombies Need Brains. Every single one they put out is a Kickstarter.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair point. That's a fair
I
point. But
mean,
that's
but
they
you
are
have
an anthology group too. They're
yeah,
not
but
as
but
you know.
but yeah, but what can work for them can work for other people too. But I do agree that it's probably easier to do that with anthologies because the way Zombies Need Brains do it is that if they fund their Kickstarter, they open up additional slots for submissions, right?
Mhm.
Whereas if they don't make their Kickstarter, they're just going to put it out with their chosen authors that they already have on the slate.
Mhm.
So, but from their very first one, and they're on what, like 7 or 8, year 7 or 8, 9,
Mhm.
something like that. So I think you can do a business model on it, but I think it depends on what you're doing and what your goals are, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah, I
All right.
like that.
So the last point here, I think is this the last one? Oh no,
No,
there's one
I
more.
think
There's
nope,
two more.
you've got the
Yeah, I
last
got
one.
one. Yeah, I got
So
one.
this one is test run and target market to show results. All right. So Barnes and Noble category manager of children's books, Scott Berkowitz, talked about how indie publishers might crack the trade retail market with prompts from the Collective Book Studios publisher and founder, Angela Engel. I come in peace, Berkowitz joked to the IBP audience, and then spoke about new Barnes and Noble locations. They're pushing up to 700 by the end of 2024, which is kind of interesting. That's a kind of interesting topic in and of itself.
Yes, I have
This
something. I have
company
something to
that
say on that.
closed a bunch of okay, we'll get to that after I get through this. Okay.
Yeah.
He said Barnes and Noble is first a bookstore, second a community center, and we want to highlight local authors and have individual story time events. We try to find out what does the neighborhood need. Now I'm going to say I think that this guy has the right of it. So y'all listen. Indie publishers and authors, he said, should pitch their books and events at Barnes and Noble locations specific to their niche. Sometimes the best option, because we don't want to return anything and we want to ensure sell-through, is to do a more targeted distribution. When it comes to taking big risks on titles, Berkowitz said, "Thank you, no thank you." He said returns mean time away from selling books and being on the floor. And what he's talking about is that, like, when a bookstore purchases books through Ingram or whatever distributor they're purchasing through, almost always Ingram, they have the option to return, if they don't sell. So they're gonna only, like, their idea is to only, you know, stock the books they think are actually gonna sell,
Yeah.
because having to do the returns is costly, you
Mhm.
know? Yes, they get their money back, which it's the only industry in which you can return your unsold goods and get your freaking money back. But it still requires someone to do all that, right? So it takes money to even do that. So they don't want to do that if they can avoid it. He says returning books just doesn't rub us the right way. There's a financial component to that too. James Daunt instilled in us that you need to buy smarter and better.
Hmm.
He explained Barnes& and Noble's inventory control system, or ICS, which tracks books' performance. This is a really special weapon we have. I think it's interesting that he calls it a weapon.
Mhm.
And I think it will be appreciated in this room, talking about the IBPA folks. The tool helps staff buy, allocate, and restock inventory across locations. For instance, he said, on the Upper West Side, you're going to sell a ton of children's and board books, while Union Square is going to have lines around the block for YA. When you realize how much variation there is, you need to have that micro expertise. That has been the primary reason of why our returns have gone down to low single digits, which is actually really smart. The
Mhm.
huge number of titles Barnes& and Noble receives does make it harder for indie publishers to be discovered at Barnes& and Noble. Berkowitz commented that this September alone, he is choosing from among 2,200 front list titles for readers 0 to 7, but a few breakout out stars do achieve success. And those 2,200 front list titles are from the big five.
Mhm.
They're not from indie
Mhm.
presses. The
Mhm.
conversation also turned to Barnes& and Noble's competition with independent bookstores, and a suggestion that authors and publishers strategically promote a book, first at independent bookstores to demonstrate community demand, and then at Barnes& and Noble, which I think is not a dumb way to do it. And
Mhm.
and in this case, I'm thinking in terms of being an indie author,
Mhm.
because yes, Barnes and Noble is the big corporate overlord of bookstores. However, they do have much more reach than your local indie store. But your local indie store is going to be much, much, much more welcoming of a local indie author. And, having a good relationship with your local indie bookstore is super important as an author in general, but especially as an indie author, right?
Mhm.
So if you can make inroads there and you can make a big splash, and you're having events and they're selling, people are coming and buying your books and stuff, and you can show that to Barnes and Noble, then they might be willing to do an event with you, carry your book, that sort of thing. So I think that's actually a really smart sort of suggestion, even though it's coming from the guy who's like, he's basically saying, prove your love to me, prove it,
Mhm.
prove it, and then maybe I'll love you
Mhm.
back. So,
Yeah, the guy who's basically saying, "Hey, if you slip me something, under the table, I
well,
might be
I
able to
don't know
get
if he's
you into
saying that,
the 2200."
but I might be willing to do that. I'm just saying.
He strikes me as the kind of guy that would, but I mean, I shouldn't
That's
judge a
funny.
book before it's covered. But um, look, I agree with a lot of what he said. I think it's smart business. I think as indies, we have to pivot. We have to, and the next segment that I'm going to talk about goes into that a little bit more.
Mhm.
But the thing that irked me about this thing here was the 700 bookstores. And the reason it irks me is because didn't they learn their lessons the first time? This is how they went out of business the first time is they got too greedy, too fast, and too big for their own britches and decided, you know what, we need to just keep expanding, expanding,
You make
expanding.
it sound like Amazon didn't exist and that happened in a vacuum. That's not all it is. And if they're doing things smarter now, then, I mean, I don't know how many bookstores they have right now, so I don't know if that's a big increase to what they have. I have no idea. I don't
I
really
mean,
go into
how
Barnes&
many
and
of them
Noble.
are in I know that malls don't exist much anymore in America, but how many of them are in locations where they're sharing spaces with something else, and that is what is triggering the opportunity to go in because they're a bookstore, they're right next to a, Forever 21. Kids are gonna go into both,
Mhm.
right, and hang out, or plus
Maybe.
plus they offer Starbucks in their damn facility
I mean,
too,
there is
so,
that. There is
you know
that, you know?
so I think this community thing is a nice thought and a nice aspect, and there are quite a few of them that do embrace that aspect of it, and they
Mhm.
should be applauded and credited for that. But they're still, after all, a corporation that is seeking to make money, and the only way they're going to do that is putting the biggest titles and the biggest names in
Yeah.
their bookstore up front, and that in itself is not going to keep them afloat, and they don't realize that they just keep making the
Yeah,
same mistake. And
that's the struggle. There's so
yeah.
much more out there than what the Big 5 put out, and
Mhm.
readers want it. We wouldn't all be here if the readers didn't want it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, but, corporations are nothing if not self-deluding.
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
okay, what's the last disruption?
Be direct and sell on your own. With these tools, get yourself a website that you can push out there to a wider distribution. Find local seller markets, not just book conferences, but farmers markets, craft events. Use it to hone your pitch, listen to what people resonate with, and note that it is in your pitches. This is coming, y'all, and you need to be utilizing these tools and things like Salesforce and Working Lit are tools to learn, because I think the time will come when you're going to be managing your own distributions, your own sales, your own ideas, and take the time to learn them like you did Microsoft Office. I think it is only going to help you. And I wanted to mention this aspect of it. This was very tiny touched upon at this conference, but I wanted to mention this aspect of it because I got a rare privilege at JordanCon to sit and listen to several authors pitch their stuff, and one of them is sitting right next to me right now. I sat at Vanessa's table and watched her just perform beautifully and magically, and she was she was honest, she was direct, she had her pitch down, she knew what she was doing, and as soon as somebody gravitated to something, she was on it, and she got it done. And I don't think there was maybe one out of every six people that walked away with nothing from her table. So there is an
I'm a
aspect of
pimp, man. I'm a pimp.
there's an aspect of that, I think, that is going to survive. If you, I mean, you look at what John Hartness does, it's an art form what he does.
Mhm.
If you go to a writers conference and John Hartness and Falstaff Books are sitting there, sit there, just stand there for 5 minutes and listen to what happens at that table. You will learn an incredible amount. It is so eye-opening, and I'm telling you right now, I know we've been harping on it. I know that it's something that I'm very keen on, but direct sales is coming. It's coming. It is
Yeah,
going to be the way that
it's
you're going
already
to manage
here.
your business.
Yeah. And I mean, you're gonna run into the issue of discoverability. That's always gonna be the issue, is
Mhm,
how to, be discovered, how are your readers gonna find you? But that's gonna be the question whether you're selling on Amazon or selling on your website. It's still gonna be the same question. So,
mhm.
and, like, I really like what you said about not don't just look for conventions and conferences. Like, I literally this morning I was doing co-working for TWT, and I got an email from a library in Athens, Georgia, which is like an hour and a half from my place, and they invited me to come to an author. They're having a local author book fair kind of thing in a couple weeks.
Mm,
And they emailed me from my website asking me if I was interested in in being part of it. And I went and looked, and I know several people who are already on the list, including Bobby Nash, our friend. And so I was like, heck yeah. So like, and it's just a 1-day thing. I had a 1-day event um a couple weeks ago. It was 5 hours,
Wow.
12 to 5. I made so I made about over a quarter of what I made at Atlanta Comic Con.
Wow.
Like in 5 hours, I made over a quarter of what I made, almost a third of what I made at a 3-day event. So do not discount those little farmers markets
Yeah.
and artisans craft fairs and makers marts and things like that. Do not pass those up.
I mean, if you have a magic system in your book and you're not at every Ren fair within 20 miles, you're making a
Well,
huge.
Ren fairs are different though, because Ren fairs are harder to get into. They're a
Okay.
little harder to get into, and
But you
they're
know
more
what I
expensive.
mean. Something
Yeah.
something to that effect,
Yes.
something that
Yes.
caters to your audience.
Yes.
If you're
Yes.
not there, you're doing a
Yes.
disservice. If you wrote a book
You
about
can do
baseball and you're not at a baseball trading card convention, you're doing
Yes.
yourself a disservice.
Yes. You can even also like organize something like that at other types of businesses. Like if you write about fantasy and stuff like that, and there's a new age shop,
Yeah.
you could do a book signing in the new age shop, with your fantasy book. If you write your baseball thing, you could actually talk to like a batting cage and be like, hey, I've got this thing. I'd like to organize this event, and I have other author friends who can come or whatever. Yeah, Anita says it's here. Whether you're offering ebooks through website, Story Origin, Book Funnel, or paperbacks through Shopify or events, authors are embracing direct sales. Yes, I could not have said it better, Anita. You're 100% on point. Also, hello, Rebecca.
Hi,
Sorry.
Rebecca. Yeah, I saw Rebecca. Hello, Rebecca.
Yeah, because I waved at her. So someday
Um,
I'll get to meet Rebecca.
It's a treat, let me tell you. It's one of
I'm
my
sure.
favorite things. One of my favorite things I've done in my life.
Okay, well, we've
out.
got 3 more stories and we've got
Yeah.
12 minutes, so we need to like
Yeah,
go,
we
go,
way
go,
overshot
go.
this aspect of it. All
Yes.
right. All right. So Meta discussed buying Simon and Schuster to help with training AI. Yes, this really did happen. The New York Times published a long article on how tech companies are trawling and stealing to gather vast amounts of data to build their generative programs. Companies like Google, Meta, and OpenAI are chasing increasingly large amounts of information, especially high quality information such as published books and articles, which have been carefully written and edited by professionals. According to the records of their internal meetings shared with the New York Times, how the New York Times does this, I have no idea, but it's awesome. Managers, lawyers, and engineers at Meta met on a nearly daily basis between March and April of 2023 to discuss how to get a hold of more data to train AI models. From those recordings, which were shared by an employee of the Mark Zuckerberg-owned company that owns Facebook and Instagram, the New York Times found that the staff had discussed buying Simon & Schuster as an option, and some debated paying $10 per book for licensing right to new titles. Meta considered getting that good data by paying $10 a book for full licensing right to be outright, or to just outright buying Simon & Schuster. That Meta was even in a position to consider hovering over one of the big 5 publishers as a grim indication of the immense power these companies have acquired. Meta ultimately balked at the prospect, not because of affordability. The $2.2 billion price tag wasn't a deterrent. It was the contingencies of the lawsuits that would be embroiled in via not just the government, but the agents, the managers of prominent authors, and the authors themselves, who would have had publication rights to fight for and not utilized in the manner in which Meta would use it. That's what ultimately stopped them from doing that.
The fear of litigation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because that ultimately would have cost them more money than the $2 billion.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And then they ultimately would have ended up probably wasting the $2.2 billion because many of these lawsuits would win.
Yeah.
And then they would not so their grand scheme of stealing people's IP would have ended up just like falling over and they would have wasted that 2.2 billion and they wouldn't have been able to do what they did or what they were going to do.
Yep. That would mean we
Yeah.
all would have to be. Wait, no. It means that we would already have to have insanely careful about pictures we post on our writings. Yeah,
Yeah, you should be careful anyway. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy, and yeah, yeah.
Somebody posted in TWT today an article or a post somebody made where she found her book on YouTube. Somebody had taken their book, had AI read it, recorded it, and posted it on YouTube.
Posted it publicly.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that surprises me for one reason. If that's for a degenerative a generative AI company, why they would let the competition take that's interesting to me. You know what I
No.
mean?
It was someone. It was a
Oh, just
random
someone,
person.
just a random.
They
It
used
wasn't a company trying to
AI.
use AI.
Yeah. No, but they
Wow.
used the AI voice thing to read it, and but it wasn't like it was this
Just
other
for
person's book.
monetization,
It
maybe.
wasn't their Yeah, it wasn't their own book. It was
Weird.
this other person's book. This woman found her book on YouTube, and they'd done so much, they took the title out and everything to try to get around YouTube's copyright infringement issues. So yeah, it's a nightmare.
File a dispute.
So
File a dispute. File a
we
dispute
are
as fast
living in
as
the
you
end of times. We are living in the end of times. All right.
can. All right.
What's next? Oh, I'm next.
Yep.
All right. Um, let's see. Do. All right. This is about the ABA and bookstores and the FTC lawsuit against Amazon. So you may recall that Amazon is the focus of an antitrust suit filed by the Federal Trade Commission and 18 states' attorneys general, alleging that it had created a monopoly and uses a set of interlocking, anti-competitive, and unfair strategies to illegally maintain its monopoly power. The suit claims that Amazon's actions allow it to stop rivals and sellers from lowering prices, degrades quality for shoppers, overcharges sellers, stifles innovation, and prevents rivals from fairly competing against Amazon. I'm really glad the government's finally caught up. Up until April 26th, though, booksellers were notably absent from the filing. But on the eve of Independent Bookstore Day, the national celebration of independent bookstores, the American Booksellers Association, the ABA, filed a motion to intervene in the Federal Trade Commission's antitrust suit against Amazon. The intervention is made in support of the FTC's case and looks to strengthen the claim that Amazon is guilty of unlawful exclusionary conduct by explicitly including the concerns of independent booksellers in the case. Allison K. Hill, who is the ABA's CEO, said, quote, in 1994, the year Amazon launched, there were 7,000 independent bookstores in the US. Today, there are only 2,500. The ABA believes our motion to intervene will help the FTC's efforts to stop Amazon's exclusionary conduct that has hurt small business, the book industry, and ultimately consumers. We're not talking about simply an unlevel playing field. Left unchecked for almost 30 years, Amazon now owns the playing field and sets the rules of the game. Don't we know it? As independent bookstores' biggest competitor, Amazon's exclusionary conduct directly impacting independent booksellers must be addressed explicitly in this suit. We believe the facts we bring to the table will significantly bolster key arguments made by the FTC in their already strong and compelling case. So, a motion to intervene can be filed by any party who shares an interest in the outcome of a case that may not be protected without adequate representation by existing parties. In the motion to intervene, the ABA argues, quote, Amazon has stifled such competition by ABA members by exercising its monopoly power to coerce publishers to accede to its demands for substantial and unjustified price discrimination, enabling Amazon to sell books to retail customers at prices that ABA members cannot match, except by foregoing a sustainable margin or incurring a loss, given the higher wholesale prices concurrently paid by ABA members for the same books. This challenge to Amazon's anti-competitive behavior impacting independent booksellers has been a long time coming, said David Grogan, director of advocacy and public policy. Quote, no one knows that better than ABA's members, who for decades have persistently called out Amazon's monopolistic and I don't know that word, monosonistic. I don't know what that word is. I clearly did not reread this part closely enough. Practices in bookselling. We believe the law is firmly on our side and that our motion will be accepted by the court. As such, Amazon's anti-competitive behavior impacting the bookselling industry can finally come under legal scrutiny. And man, do I hope that they get added to that suit, because honestly, this, I remember it's probably been about 10 years now. Macmillan, the publishing company Macmillan, Amazon wanted them to lower their ebook prices to $9.99, and they said no. And so Amazon turned off the buy button on all Macmillan authors, not just the ebooks. There were authors who didn't even have ebooks at that time, and all their books were print books, and Amazon turned off their button. So if that is not where is it? A demand for unjustified price discrimination. Like, I don't know what is, because they've been doing this for decades.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. In which there's only one buyer, the monopsonist. It's the P and the S in that order that don't work for my mouth. Like a monopoly, a monopsony also has imperfect market conditions. Thank you for looking it up, Rebecca. You are awesome. So
I mean, let's just hope that happens, right? Because I think there's strength in numbers. Number one, number two. I think also the independent book marketplace is going to be hurt by any ruling that doesn't favor the ABA in this case, right? So if they don't get on board, they may be facing their own challenges trying to see through that.
Do it independent. It's way easier to get tacked on to a government suit. I mean, it's way more economical to get tacked onto a government suit than to have to bring your own suit. And honestly, if the ABA could have afforded to bring their own suit, they would have by now.
And Amazon is going to file motions and deflections and they're going to continue to try to drag this thing out past the election, because they know it's an election year and nobody's going to make a ruling based upon whatever party gets power and all that. So this is bad timing, but I think that the FTC is an independent agency on its own. So we'll see if that has any bearing on pushing this forward. But I think it's going to go for another year or two before this gets resolved. So
for sure. But I hope they break them up, because they did. I was actually talking about Ma Bell. I was talking about Ma Bell, and a lot of people watching this may not either remember this or may not be from the U.S., and so they may not know. But AT&T back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s were called Ma Bell and they owned all of the phone lines, like anything having to do with telephones, they owned it, which meant you couldn't. I mean, back then you had to pay for long distance, you had to pay a flat fee for your local calls, and they could. I could teach you a master class on Ma Bell, and they could do whatever they wanted. Well, the FTC broke them up. And I think that's what they need to do. Amazon, which started out as an online book retailer, is now doing healthcare. Like, you can have a doctor's appointment with Amazon. Come on now.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
And Rebecca says, sad fact, they still do just under double quotes now.
But that's the whole thing. Like, they're separate. Like, they're the different pieces are separate, and that's what needs to happen. They need to be separate companies. My father worked for Bob Bell as they were doing this shit, and I worked for 2 of their dummy corps. Gotcha. Gotcha. Fucking corporations, man.
Yeah,
Fucking
yeah.
capitalism. All right.
Um, so we're gonna finish off the night
Onward.
with a story that is near and dear to my heart. And I promise I have an angle for everybody out there to so stay with me here, and just ride through this because it's a I think it's an important story. And for those who don't know, Slam Dance announced that this artist-led Filmmakers for Filmmakers organization, its annual film festival, will now move to Los Angeles starting in February of 2025. The move to Los Angeles, the heart of the entertainment industry, will allow for the continued growth of Slam Dance's year-round mission to provide an accessible and dynamic community for truly independent, visionary filmmakers and creators. The festival will now run February 20th through the 26th in 2025 at venues in and surrounding Hollywood, including the Landmark Theaters and DGA Theater Complex, with more locations to be announced. The festival aims to be financially accessible with in-person passes starting at $50
Wow.
and any programs free to the public.
That's good.
Scrolled past my own stuff here. All right. Sorry, everybody. Existing and new programs will be featured at the festival, including Polytechnic, Slam Dance's free education endeavor 60, and a series of 1-minute short films made on any format. Next Wave LA, a program of new media work made by LA-based artists, and an experiential and cutting-edge dig digital interactive gaming program. Panasonic Lumix will be the official sponsor of the 2025 Slam Dance Film Festival in Los Angeles, solidifying a partnership at the intersection of the cutting edge of technology and independent filmmaking. Additional industry partners include the DGA, Landmark Theaters, and AGBO. Our journey in the film industry began in Slam Dance, and our commitment to the festival and the opportunities it offers filmmakers has remained unwavering, said filmmakers and AGBO co-founders Anthony and Joe Russo. Over the years, we found the privilege of collaborating with numerous filmmakers through our fellowship program and various innovations in our studio. We look forward to witnessing the continued growth and impact of Slam Dance in its new home. The mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, also endorsed the move, saying, "We're thrilled to announce that Slam Dance Film Festival is moving to Los Angeles and will host its first event here beginning in February 2025. To know the history and landscape of independent storytelling is to know that Los Angeles has always been a home and a source of inspiration for artists and as the creative capital of the world. As we welcome filmmakers, artists, and cinema enthusiasts from around the world, the Slam Dance Film Festival will serve as a dynamic hub for creativity, connection, and job opportunities for Los Angelinos." Slam Dance is coming to Los Angeles, building upon our success in Utah. We will grow the festival with greater accessibility in Los Angeles and continue our work in launching new films, new careers, and new ideas in filmmaking, said Slam Dance president and co-founder Peter Baxter. With new and existing collaborations, our mission to increase the global value of independent film and digital media will serve the Los Angeles arts community. The festival made its home in Park City, Utah, founded in 1995, and thrived in its most recent edition in January 2024, with screenings in both Park City and the Doubletree Park City, Yarrow, and Salt Lake City at the University of Utah. Audiences attended in record numbers, resulting in an 18% increase in tickets and pass sales compared to 2023. It's a yearly celebration of emerging film talent around the world, and 2024 lineup consisted of 113 films, 17 of which were world premieres. And it's had its most diverse lineup, with 43 of the films by BIPOC creators and 43% by female or non-binary filmmakers. All films selected in the narrative and feature documentary competitions category were directorial debuts without U.S. distribution, with budgets less than $1 million. And a feature that has been unique to the festival since its founding, it features hailed from 20 different countries, including Afghanistan, Australia, Brazil, Canada, Germany, Greece, Iran, Israel, and so on and so forth. The submissions will open up in May, so any budding filmmakers who are watching this. Okay. Anyway, so here's my thoughts on all this. Who's bowing out? You were saying goodbye to somebody? Oh, okay.
Hang on. Sorry, I was muted. I muted myself because anyway, I was saying it's 5 days. Submissions for the festival open in 5 days
Oh, yeah.
is what I
Thank
was
you.
saying.
Oh,
Sorry.
thank you. Okay, so my thoughts are this: Slam Dance has no choice in doing this. They were kind of backed into a corner, and this move is only cost effective. Is not only cost effective, believe it or not, but naturally easy for them to make because their headquarters year round is in LA. Park City is incredibly niche, and once upon a time at this festival, it was seen more like the stepbrother to Sundance, but in reality, it's become much more viable and accessible option for true independent film. It's just no longer the anarchist alternative that it once was seen as. And the first weekend in Park City is so vastly different for me this year than I've ever experienced before. Used to be able to not even roam the streets. Parking was a fierce competition, and as getting to viewing to a viewing and just as viewing venues, they were not there was no lines at all. Everything was non-existent. The parties were scaled back. The screenings, which used to have long lines, were half that. And the slam dance, and that I think is part because slam dance was not on the same main street that it normally is with Sundance. And I think putting slam dance away from Sundance this year in a different part of Park City was kind of the experiment to see if this could work. And as you heard, it had record numbers. So now it's going to be heralded on its own, covered more widely. And now it has to live up to that building and hype that it's going to generate. This is good on many levels. The innovations that have come from Slam Dance have come because the core principle is that this festival is designed by those who are in the art in the first place. Alumni welcoming new alumni into the club. As stated above, they have already made a push for generation saturation, 1 minute attention spans, being elevated into its own category with the 1 minute filmmaking thing. This is a beauty of the festival. I worry though in 3 years that this might become Toronto. See, Toronto used to be this North American alternative to Con, and then Tribeca came and it had this similar story of Slam Dance where filmmakers were starting to get denied because Toronto became this world premiere only Oscar chasing celebrity sighting festival and didn't concentrate so much on the filmmaking anymore. So it branched out into Soho on its own, Tribeca did, and made a name and an alternative name for itself and truly featured independent film instead of using it as window dressing. So now that Slam Dance is on its own, will it become that? Will agencies and studios look at this as an opportunity to hijack one more institution? So in a lot of ways, I trust those whose spirit started this foundation, right? And who have entrusted to carry the torch for the future. This may be the barometers indies need for what the year might hold, though. Much better than Sundance ever could. I always felt that way about this festival. Now no longer in the cast shadow of an evil empire. It can stand on its own and it's in its own merit. And I think this will be telling of the legacy of independent art, right? Because why it's relevant to you all is because this could very well show you your futures. Maybe not in the context of filmmaking, but in the context of creating. The innovation, the camaraderie, and the sheer opportunities that come from February in Los Angeles will say a lot about how we will get on and how we can move forward. A lot of us here who watch our shows and are part of our community are involved in multiverse or other conventions, and they're looking for a way to make everything they want it to be. Slam Dance might be the beacon and the barometer needed to see how well that can or cannot be done. That's why I think this news is important and why it's big, not just for the indie film community, but indie creators all over, arts everywhere. The landscape of worlds is changing and the pivots points are there. And can we find the right ones for us to make us relevant as part of the lexicon instead of just being on the fringes or in a niche? And that's what I think is so important about this move. We'll see. This is just beginning. I don't think we'll have any any results or anything that we can build upon for a
Have to
while.
wait till next year. Yeah,
But
have to wait till next year, see how it goes.
honestly, Vanessa, this is one of the many. This is one of the small things about multiverse I worry about. Right? growing too fast, without, we're jumping into a deeper pool this year in multiverse, right? And
Mhm.
so, and while this year may not tell the story of what's to come, it's going to set the stage for what's to come, and that's what Slam Dance is doing as well. So we're seeing this happen all over the place because we're tired of being at things that don't have anything to do with us, right? We're tired of
Yeah.
not being involved and having a place where we feel like one of the greatest things about Slam Dance is you go there and you feel like you're one of the people there,
Part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same with multiverse. I think there's just something to be said for that, where you don't,
Mhm.
where you feel like you're more like at Disneyland at Dragon Con, right? And
Yeah.
at
Yeah,
Slam
yeah.
Dance,
'Cause
you're
it's so
you're
big. Yeah.
yeah, you're walking around going, okay, there's so and so, there's whatever, right? And then you're paying $60 for a hamburger. That's I
I
mean,
don't
Los
pay
Angeles is not
$60
going
for
to
a
make it
hamburger.
cheaper. I'm going to tell you that right now. Los Angeles is not going to make it cheaper, but there's much more out there. And I
And
just
also, how cool is it to, like, see your film being shown in the landmark,
right.
right? Like, how freaking cool would that be?
Right. I mean,
So,
yeah. I mean, if
I
they get Chinese theater involved, maybe there would be like
right?
a big premiere at the
Yeah.
Chinese theater.
And Sean, I agree with you 100%. You always know when Joe is passionate about something because he is right there. He is right there. So, yes.
Yeah.
I hope that this works. Like, I'm not obviously in film. It's
Right.
something I would like to do at some point, before I die in like 30 years. But I really hope that this works for that. I really do. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
So,
I just, because I know this business pretty well and how awful it is, I just worry for that aspect of it. And that is kind of what is kind of lingering with me with multiverse a little bit. I shouldn't let that happen, but because I just know how business
we
is,
got it.
you know,
We got it. Don't worry about
I
it. We
I
got it.
just I feel like yeah, there's just some trepidation, and until you in it and you start going through it, but I trust the people who are involved. And that's not every I if Austin Film Festival said we're moving from Austin to Dallas, I wouldn't trust the Austin Film Festival, right? I would, but I trust Slam Dance, and I trust how how Multiverse is doing things. I trust all of that.
Sit on all the Chuck Tingle RPGs.
Yeah,
Yes, Rebecca, agreed.
and that's
Oh,
cool. And so I wish them luck. I'm going to obviously be a part of that in some way, some capacity, and I'm real excited for it. I really wanted to talk about that tonight, so I appreciate you all indulging me for a minute to do that.
well, I
But
mean, it's important.
that's our show. We way overshot the idea of our top story being a little bit
But
shorter.
but we're actually still at our normal cutoff time.
Yeah,
Like, this
pretty
is
much.
usually when we're wrapping it up, so I think it worked out okay.
You have no idea. You have no idea, Rebecca.
Oh, wait. Oh, I should share with you so we do Sean does Chuck Tingle RPGs. So, Sean, do you mind if I read the description for this year's Chuck Tingle RPG?
Oh
Because he just
no.
told me he wrote it especially for me.
Oh.
So let me get his permission.
It's very
I'm waiting
potato
for
at multiverse, he says.
yeah. He says, "Please do." Okay, good. So, it's called Potato Masher, the Chuck Tingle RPG Go. The description is, "The man from Idaho fled across the wastes of the old world, and the buckaroos followed." So, for those of you who don't know, it's a riff on Stephen King's Gunslinger, which is the man in black. The man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. So that was an excellent job, Sean. And yes, Rebecca, this is a thing.
It
It
is.
happens every year at Multiverse. Sean, make sure it's on the schedule every year, and people have a freaking blast. So
if it didn't go past Monster Mash, I would have gotten some more footage of it last year. But because
Monster
it
Mash,
ran into Monster Mash, I had to go to Monster Mash. So
Monster Mash, this year I think is going to be at 10 o'clock.
okay,
So Chuck Tingle will start at 8:30. So it should work out okay.
I'll get some footage for
So
you, Rebecca, to show you how ridiculous this all is. But yeah, it's
it's going to be
fucking
awesome.
fantastic. It's so great.
It's going to
Uh,
be awesome. Okay.
but anyway, but
Speaking of multiverse, you should talk about how it's not going to start Monday, but
oh
it'll be
yeah.
starting soon.
The Spotlight on Multiverse, we moved it back a week, so the spotlights will start the following week, not this week, this coming week. So everybody can look forward to meeting some of the folks that are going to be involved in Multiverse. We've got some directors, we've got some guests, we're going to have some sponsors. We're going to have all that happening here, and just like we did last year, we're going to do this throughout the entire summertime up until the end of July. Then we'll be back in September for those who didn't get a chance to be a part of it, who are lately, late to the multiverse, coming into the multiverse. We're going to have that going up until multiverse, and we'll finish off like we did last year with the amazing and awesome director of programming, the one and only Vanessa Junta, and that'll be an awesome show. And it'll be fantastic. And yeah, I'm just so honored and privileged to be a part of this experience, and for Multiverse to have this faith in me to do this again. I
And
really
Joe
am.
got to see the new hotel.
I did, yes, I did get to see it, and it's fantastic, and it's real
Yeah.
exciting. And yeah, everything about what Multiverse is becoming and doing is real exciting. And you know, don't mind my intrepidation. It'll go away, I promise. As soon as I'm there, I'm very excited to be there and the opportunity to have what we're doing there, and it's just so amazing. And as is my co-host each and every time we do this. So Vanessa, you want to take us out of here?
Yes. Y'all don't forget, it's always time to go indie now.